what the weird thing is?
What?
Just like the other thing next door was the holdovers.
Yeah.
And right as I was coming out of the bathroom, there was a crowd. So I asked like the next group of people, I was like, hey, how was the holdovers? And they look at me weird. And then they turn around and look at the sign. And they're like, yeah, it was okay. Like I was like weird for asking.
How was the movie you just saw?
Yeah.
And they were like weirded out by that?
Well, it's like there's always like the fifth friend who shows up late to like the group of the movies. It's like, what are we seeing? I don't even know. Doesn't pay attention half the time. And then walks out at the end. That was them.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, and because
like the movie.
Yeah, because the holdovers was like one of my
liked
top
it.
5 of the year. Yeah, so
Yeah,
you
I
did end
enjoyed
up
it.
seeing it?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
My brother described it. It's like it's a movie that starts out good and then just kind of keeps getting better. You know,
Slowly.
Yeah, very slowly.
Slow climb.
Yeah, where did we park? Yeah.
We're up here.
So, Poor Things. What'd you think?
No thanks. Not
Yeah.
for me. No.
You know, I was thinking about
I feel like I want to call it pretentious, but I feel like me
No.
calling it pretentious is pretentious.
it's too like acknowledging of its own limitations to be like pretentious. Like my take on it was like I like The Favorite, the last movie the director and screenwriter did, but on that movie,
Which was what?
The Favorite with Emma Stone,
Okay.
and it was just basically about Emma Stone in Victorian times. It works her way up from the very bottom to the top to become the Queen's favorite, and she battles Rachel Weisz along the way. It's just clear stakes.
Oh, Rich and I are watching Dead Ringers.
Yeah, and I thought midway through the movie, I'm like, man, I bet you Rachel Weisz wishes she was younger so that she could play this role, because for The Favorite, that was written by Deborah Davis, and this was just written by the one guy. Like The Favorite was written by Tony McNamara and Deborah Davis, and I thought, like, is this movie missing like a legitimate female point of view? Because it doesn't feel as well-rounded as that movie did. It's just repetitive, where it's like, oh, she goes to a guy and, you know, he tries to control her and then she ends up driving him crazy. And then by like the third time that happened, I'm like, okay, I get it. Do we really need...
Right.
It's like that feeling at the wedding when you're like, oh, the final boss shows up. It's like you thought the movie was over, but there's still another 20
There's still
minutes.
a third guy.
Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah.
And the annoying thing was that, like, is this movie a victim of me going a bit beforehand? Because I saw the interview that Emma Stone gave with Bradley Cooper where she basically explained that of, like, the movie is her going to a guy and then not. And then the other thing I heard was that Christopher Abbott, who's the guy who shows up at the end, somebody was, like, said on Twitter in a take that just sounded so wrong, even though I hadn't seen the movie. It's like, this guy steals the show. And people are like,
Chris Abbott at the end? No.
Yeah, and people are like, he very pointedly does not steal the show. And then like 5 other people were like, yeah, there was no point to his character, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I get the point, but the point that it has to illustrate is just an exaggerated version of what we've already seen.
We just saw, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, here's a guy who controls everybody with his hand.
He said, he's just like, I've been, my whole life is taking territory, now I'm going to take you. And she's like, I'm not territory. And it's like the guy before him and the guy before him. Like,
yeah, and it's like too often, I get it because it was consistent with the tone, but they make the subtext text. I don't mind, like, when a movie isn't subtle, but, like, with The Favorite, and it was the thing that annoyed me a bit about it, is, like, they could have taken a cleaver to the runtime, and this could have been, like, a 90-minute story.
Yeah.
And it felt like the whole scene of Gerard Carmichael, where he shows up, and he's like, hey, check it out. Poor Things, you know? And it's like, oh my god, I need to do something. And he's like, why'd you show me that? He's like, oh, just to make you feel bad. And it's like, well, okay, well, thanks for that divergence.
He was the only one that talked with like a modern voice, not with an accent at all. Or
because he's like a comedian and not a good actor. But
it's
everybody's doing this thing, everybody's putting in an effort.
Go the other way.
And he's like, oh, this is too hard. I'm just gonna be the one black guy and I'll do this thing.
But I didn't know if it was intentional or not, so I was like, okay.
I mean, you could read it either way because it's so generalized.
Because it was like, oh, he's a cynic, so it's like, therefore he's like too cynical to even participate in a movie. Like, is it this meta thing, you know?
Well, it's just like, I don't know. Like, personally, I find him lazy. Like, he hosted the Golden Globes last year, and his jokes were just, like, so lame. It's like, oh, I'm black, and they gave me a lot of money because the Golden Globes have a black problem, and I decided to take the money because I decided I wanted to sell out, and then afterwards I figured out that they were trying to change their reputation, and it was, like, kind of funny, but it was anti-comedic. In this movie, I expected it to be more comedic, but the main thing that I was thinking about, when I saw The Favorite, it was in the full Cineplex theater, and, you know, when you go to the traditional movies, consider the screening like an art house cinema.
Sure.
It was like, I'm going to see this movie with a full, proper audience. In Kingston, there's, like, a lot of old people, like, and the old people would have gotten the humor of this movie a bit better, I think. Like, there was that one lady, I'm not sure if you heard, and she, like, laughed a lot.
On the bottom, yeah.
But it's like,
left of us, yeah.
because it's like, these people have, like, lived a full life, so they get those humors, whereas,
there wasn't anything that was over my head. Like,
yeah, no,
it's
not about that. It's about point of view. Like, oh, that's a small thing, that's funny. Or I know when I fight with my husband, like, just those kinds of things. Sounds pedantic, but when I saw A Star Is Born and The Favorite as well, and you could feel people leaning in. Oh, this is when I'm supposed to laugh? Oh, okay. You know, and it's, you don't have to laugh, but you get it. And I felt like everybody, the majority of the people in that theater were our age, and they were, like, trying to get it the whole time. And, like, I don't know, it didn't feel like, it wasn't a full enough theater to get, like, the full experience.
I think I can attest to that. Like, I don't want to say I was spending the entire movie trying to get it, but I spent a chunk of it trying to get it. And then I think about Paris, when she became a whore, I was just like, all right, I just don't think I'm getting what this is.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, I don't know what the through line was. Like, the best that I have to understand is this girl finds herself, discovers herself, I guess. But it was just weird that, you know, she started the movie as, like, a child. They called her a retard, right? And, like, okay. And then she gets, like, smart pretty quick. I don't know what the timeline, few months, few years, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then she gets, like, much, much smarter to, like, whatever standard, to, like, you know, current standard of the movie or whatever. But, like, I'm like, okay, is she finding herself? Because she was calling sex, like, what was it, furious jumping?
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, so she can, like, articulate certain words, like, you know, big words.
I thought there'd be a greater focus on her development, like,
yeah,
because it kind of, like,
also halfway through when I'm in Paris, I'm just kind of like, why do I care? Like, why do I care that that she discovers herself?
Yeah.
In the overarching, she does it. Oh, great, she discovered herself. What? Who cares?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
I was thinking the same thing of, like, you know, I mean, the last thing you probably saw there was Anatomy of a Fall, right?
Yeah.
And I saw Anatomy of a Fall, and right as the opening credits, my brother, who's, like, really brilliant at this stuff, was like, so we have a clear setting, stakes, scenario. We know what's going to happen and what needs to happen immediately before the credits roll. Everything is super clear, and it's sort of the stakes of this movie. It's about, like, life and living life, and it's like, what's at stake?
In future, but also past Europe. Right?
Yeah. It has that kind of interesting retrograde thing. And it, like, was a beautifully designed world. It's just, like, it's this, I wouldn't say the same thing as Oppenheimer, but it was, hey, we spent all this money making a Hollywood picture, and we've designed all these beautiful sets. What do we have to say? Oh, life is great, or it sucks, depending on your point of view. And it's like Oppenheimer
life is what you make it.
Yeah, and Oppenheimer made way much more effort to, like, be entertaining, and this movie was, like, not that. Like, it's kind of like tried to, I wouldn't say that it tried to be smart. Like, it felt like everybody was working to their strengths, but I thought that was kind of like one note, because it was just kind of like, guy wrote it, guy directed it, and it's like, hey, aren't men shitty because they all try and control people? And then it's like the one guy who she's supposed to sort of end up with, who was played by Rami Youssef, is, oh, isn't he good, like, not controlling her?
Because he didn't try to do this other stuff.
Yeah, and it's like at the end where it's like, oh, are you gonna stop me? And he's like, no. And it's like, oh, okay, like,
I guess I'll be with you because you let me be what I want to be.
It's representative of, like, the era of, and this sounds very pretentious, forgive me, but, like, post Me Too. In this case, the men who made it don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to seem, that they don't get it, or that they're being sexist or stuff. So they just kind of sit back, and the movie felt like very consciously reluctant to critique its character, who doesn't even see its central flaw as a flaw, and that led to a very like plain movie.
Speaking of the Me Too thing, or post Me Too, is the guy who didn't. You just said his name.
Christopher Abbott or Mark Ruffalo?
No.
Rami Youssef.
Rami Youssef. Yeah, so when they were going for the walk near the park, when she was kind of ready to come back home and to get married, he was just like, oh, yes. She's just like, I was a whore in Paris, right? And he's just like, oh, yes, I do. And she's just, you're okay with that? And he's just like, well, I suppose so. It's your body, and you can give it freely. And it's just like, but I guess I'll still marry you because I love you. And it's just like, that's kind of weird, but okay.
Yeah.
Like, not to say like, oh, now I'm, trying to control her. But he was just so, you went away for a while and tore my heart out. I'm just jealous of all the guys that got to sleep with you because they got to spend intimate time with you and I didn't.
It felt like a movie that was like reluctant to challenge its like main character, and it's like at that point you're like, okay, maybe a woman should have made this movie. There's something interesting about like watching movies like Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah.
Was like, that's written and directed by a woman. It was like co-written with her like husband, and she's like, we managed not to kill each other during the thing. But they're just very common, slow, subtle touches in that movie that, like, if you can tell that it was written by a woman, that just make it seem more fully like, oh, this is a point of view of like that a guy wouldn't have thought of. And it's like when watching Poor Things, like there's nothing here that's surprising me. Like I wanted a bold, surprising movie, and it was right then when it's black and white and it opens, I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, well it's obviously gonna go to color when her world opens up.
When she discovers herself or something.
Yeah. And it was just kind of like it.
Which it did.
Yeah. So for what it had to say, I didn't find it surprising. I thought it suffered from the same mistakes of the director's previous movie, and it wasn't also as good as the two movies he did before that. Called The Lobster with Colin Farrell.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, what a delightfully weird movie with a weird sense of humor and how people talk.
Killing of a Sacred Deer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was a movie I got 30 minutes into, and I'm like, you know what? I'm out.
Really?
Yeah, I can finish it, but it's just when I was watching it with my father, and it was like, okay, do we have to watch this because it's like pointedly...
I think Sacred Deer, if you liked The Lobster or like were able to get through The Lobster... relatively enjoyed it, it's the same thing for a Sacred Deer, I think.
Yeah, the only problem is that it stars Barry Keoghan, and, that guy from Saltburn irritates me to look at.
Killing of a Sacred Deer? It's Colin Farrell again.
No, but the young boy in that is the same guy from Saltburn.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So how would you rate it?
Poor Things?
Yeah.
I don't know, like I want to give it like a 4 out of 10, just because like... I didn't care for the story. I didn't care for her growth.
Yeah.
It didn't really do anything for me.
Yeah.
But I do give it a few points for its creativity. Like, I kind of don't want my negative rating to, like, discourage something new.
Yeah,
and creative.
people from discovering.
Yeah, because it's just like everything's a sequel now, or like, a reboot or whatever the hell. This is completely different, completely new. And it's like, great, yes, give me something new and original. I want that. This just wasn't for me. I just thought like the art and the setting and the scene or whatever was like this
cool.
weird. It was kind of cool. Like there were some cool parts, but I mean, like not for me because it just felt like this, college kid Pablo Picasso surrealism that I just didn't land with me. But like, thank you for doing something original and doing for something new. Give me more of that. This just wasn't for me.
Yeah,
that's all.
For me, it was like I'd give it a 5 out of 10. And again, it's like wonderfully crafted world. The music was good. The makeup was good. The costumes were great.
Costumes were good, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that Mark Ruffalo's character was like interesting, but he wasn't.
I feel like he put in the most effort out of anybody.
Yeah,
like I don't care for Mark Ruffalo, but like he was a little bit ridiculous and he had the accent, but like he went for it. He went for gold.
And it's funny to me because I heard a story about he was worried that he was doing terribly the whole time and that he would be replaced, and he was like intimidated by Willem Dafoe, and their big only scene was coming up where he's like Ruffalo's character is first introduced, and like Ruffalo is like a shy guy.
Contract.
Yeah, he was like a shy guy, and he was just like, am I getting this? And like and like as a joke, Willem Dafoe brought Oscar Isaac onto set because he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get fired. I'm gonna get fired. I'm gonna get
just
fired."
to mess with him.
Yeah, exactly, to mess it with him. And then finally, the director came to him and said, "Why are you so nervous? You did this in rehearsal. You're fine." And then but yeah, he was the best kind of in that. His character he plays, like, it's like charming guys in Hollywood as they get older, they start to play these like dirtier roles of like, you know, he was kind of
challenging themselves in a different way.
Yeah, or playing like my mom calls them a rodder. Like he's like a bad guy essentially.
Okay,
like he's ostensibly the antagonist of the movie. If you had to pick one,
I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, he was the most interesting character. Whether that's in the writing or him, I'd say that he added a bit.
I did think that just about every character. I think every character did it about. Mostly Mark Ruffalo.
He added the most humor.
Yeah, I think that like this one part that almost every character did, mostly him, and it could be the script, is every time they dropped the F-bomb or like got frustrated and dropped the F-bomb or whatever, it just felt me out of the movie because it was like this London, 19th century decorum, whatever, and it was just like, for fuck's sakes, and it's just like, oh, that's like a modern break. Like they kind of like broke out of the era and then went right back in. But like almost everybody did it. That got frustrated. Like they all said it.
It's an attempt at modernity. Although it could,
I don't know.
You could tell me that word existed for like 500 years and people use it. But there's this. They call it the Tiffany theory. It's as stupid a name as the Mandela effect because it's like. It doesn't seem properly named, but it's like people think that the name Tiffany, I guess, is newer, but it goes back to like 13th century. So if you were to have a period piece...
I was going to say Tiffany's an old name.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like the point where it's like when making Gladiator... they were going to have billboards because they had billboards in ancient Roman times. But if you saw in the movie Gladiator that they had billboards, it would take you out.
Common knowledge, you wouldn't know that, so people think is a weird thing.
Yeah, because you would think like, oh, that's a modern thing. That's not of the time. So it takes people out, even though it's being accurate. So it's like, that's what made me think of that when you mentioned the F word. I thought what you were going to say is like, every time somebody said it, it took me out. But when Mark Ruffalo said it, he said it in like a tonality that like made sense that other people didn't live up to.
I think you're right. But again, like I do think I know that the F word is like can be an older word, but just like it felt that they're
forcing it.
They kind of
it didn't feel necessary.
Yeah, the one time where he freaks out at the at Emma Stone during dinner when he takes her aside or whatever, and he's basically just like carving her up and down that she's the polite society and blah blah blah, and it was just like, oh, you're supposed to be say magnificent and what like all these like nice words, but like just a second ago he's just like cursing as if it was like modern day, and it just felt wrong. Like it didn't feel right, even though accurately it could be correct.
You said something interesting right after about Emma Stone being like, what a long way from Superbad, and I thought about that too.
Yeah, man.
Of like, easy,
no kidding.
And it's like, why would she want to do this? And it's like, winning an Oscar aside, because she was nominated for The Favorite and stuff, and she knows, like, she just absolutely like trusts the people that she's with, and she's good in it. It's like, this is her like. Maybe when you look back on the arc of her career, this is her at her like most popular and successful critically and commercially. So that's maybe why she wanted to do it. The movie itself, I don't know if Alistair, I can't remember the name of the author of the book on which it's based, but it was written in like the 90s. But they like took it, and it feels like we've mentioned Me Too influenced. Like it's post, it's of this time, and I would like that, points to all the craftsmanship that went into it. Like, it's a bit repetitive. It doesn't have a whole lot of insights. I'd say to people, check it out if they're looking for something new. But, 5 out of 10, it didn't, work for us.
A question for you. So, Emma Stone won the Golden Globe for this. So, obviously, we don't know what the outcome of the Oscars is going to be. But do you think that she got it? Because
there's this question.
Is it because it was technically difficult in terms of she did nude scenes?
Yeah.
She played a retard and then grew. Why did she get it? Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, if that's the best, if she gets, like, best actress for the year, I think to myself, like, really? Like, of all
Well, that's
year?
the thing that surprised me is, like, I'm waiting for the best actress performance because that's when I've told, you know,
I'm not saying it's bad.
No, but it's like Emma Stone running away with it. And it's like, oh, is this the same thing where it's like, you know, Ana de Armas was nominated for Blonde, and she does, like, similar things in that movie. Like, she's nude, she's...
Sex scenes.
Yeah, and it's like, is this, like, a quote-unquote, like, danger pay for it? And, like, yeah, I didn't find that it was, like, she was as good in this as she was in The Favorite, but it's, like, technically a demanding role because of, like, a lot of sex scenes and stuff. Yeah. So I think, like, Oscars being predetermined, of course, it's, like, she's gonna be nominated because of, like, that sort of thing, and it's like a really meaty role for a woman, and there aren't a lot of meaty roles. But I would say, like, I would say they will probably, if I was voting, they would give it to not Stone, but Gladstone, Lily Gladstone from Killers of the Flower Moon. She's up for Best Actress, and I would say I would probably pick that role.
Why?
In terms of, like, Best Actress, I don't know. I was more convinced.
Man, she, like, was monotone almost the whole movie.
Well, fair enough.
Monotone or low.
So it's like,
Ooh,
if
it's
not
deep, is it?
Yeah. So aside from those two, then the Stones, cast them away.
Throw the Stones away.
Then Margot Robbie as Barbie. Better than those two, probably, because I felt that Barbie was, like, I bought her weirdly as, like, a person. Like, Margot Robbie really is that good, and of course, like, Ken gets all the spotlight because it's like a flashier role. But it's like Margot Robbie routinely is like, oh, I believe whoever she's playing as a person. So there's her, and then
that's a good way to put it. I believe her. Yeah, okay.
And then the other one is Sandra Hüller, the girl from Anatomy of a Fall.
For Anatomy of a Fall?
Yeah, for Anatomy of a Fall. She might get supporting actress for that Zone of Interest preview that we saw, which could be the next movie we see depending on Oscar nominations.
I'm open to that.
Yeah, because I was thinking, like, this weirdly, and I didn't expect it because I said to you beforehand how excited I am that, like, this is oddly, like, we saw Drive My Car, that was 3 hours. Going in, we saw The Whale, that didn't have, like, great reviews, but it was, like, interesting to watch. This is oddly, for sitting in that theater, the toughest sit that we've had for, like, seeing a movie in theaters. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Drive My Car, like, as
I was worried going in. I was like, is this gonna be like I'm just gonna be looking at my watch the whole time or something, or thinking about other things? But I was absorbed in that, and and it didn't happen here.
And and it was like very like comes in waves. But even the highest wave of that movie was like, low. Yeah, it was like low in terms of like peak, but like the impact was there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like a soft gut punch that you couldn't, let stop.
And this movie was, like, emotionally inert because it's like I'd heard that, like, going in, I'd heard Mark Ruffalo was good and Willem Dafoe was good. I thought Willem Dafoe was, like, maybe okay. His voice seemed a little inconsistent.
He was all right.
He was a fascinating character.
I think he just did just fine. I mean, like, I think... As weird as it sounds, I liked him in The Lighthouse more.
Yeah. A movie that I turned off after 10 minutes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm like...
I went through the whole thing.
I was like 10 minutes in, and I'm just like, I know I'm not going to like this movie. I don't like Robert Pattinson
I like Robert Pattinson.
It's black and white 4-3, and I'm just like, why am I torturing myself? Because it's just kind of...
I liked it. I'll
finish it someday, but it's like the director's follow-up, The Northman, I didn't like at all. And The Witch I found super tedious. So I'm just kind of like 0 for 2, and it's like, okay, I'm just watching this movie because everybody else says it's so good. It feels more like a technical exercise. It's a movie that I'd have to watch in different circumstances than because I watch movies, which is just either in the theater, at the screening room, Landmark, or in my house. There are just some movies you can't really... Like, you have to watch under different circumstances,
Yeah, I mean, like Maverick. Like, you want to see that on the big screen, full go.
Yeah, and it's like, if you watch it, in your house alone... and you're
still good, but
not as good.
Not as good,
Yeah. So, I mean, next up we'll see Zone of Interest, maybe, and, if I were to give this movie any Oscars, I kind of, like, I'd say production design.
You don't have to give any Oscars.
No. I know. I'd say production design, but Barbie was arguably better. Or
Who
you
are the
could-
other best actresses that are nominated?
I was saying production design.
no,
but-
but you said the Two Stones.
Oh yeah. So we have these are just because the Oscar nominations aren't out for 2
I thought
weeks.
they were.
No, just the Golden Globes, Critics' Choice, all the ones that don't matter. The only ones that really sort of matter are Golden Globes because they're funny, and then Oscars because they matter.
Yeah, but
but
I
now
remember
they
you
have
said
like
that-
15 movies.
I remember you said the Globes were like the Oscar pregame.
They are, but it's just like now there's like 15 friggin' like different like Critics' Choice Awards, the Producers Guild Awards, the Screen Actors Guild Awards, all that basically have it down to a science that we know all the Oscar nominees before they come out. But it's like it's going to be one of those women, the other ones that could be nominated, although they usually throw like a curveball of like a movie you've never heard of, some person, and people are like, oh, I got to go see that. Like last year it was To Leslie, but Natalie Portman in May, December. Or Julianne Moore. Have you seen that on Netflix?
No.
It's
but,
on Netflix. It's about like a woman, Julianne
know.
Moore, who marries
like
Yeah.
the high school kid.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
Natalie Portman is good in that
Is that
movie.
based off a true story or something?
It's inspired by
Inspired by
it
it,
to the
okay.
point where the guy who was the actual victim of it is like, yeah, my story's ripped off, and everybody on Twitter was like trying to be politically correct. It's like, how dare nobody should ever make a biopic unless somebody says that it's okay, and everybody's like, that's the complete opposite of why people do art. You do art to be challenged because it's not okay for some people, because it's not safe. And for, Poor Things, I wanted a less safe film. It felt safer than I thought it would. Like the Favorite felt
that's
like
a good way to put it.
So you should watch The Favorite and then come back and we'll watch Zone of Interest, and then you can tell me by then like the Oscars will be out and we'll be like, all right, go see this, and we'll talk about it.
But that's a good way to put it. Like the movie, I feel like it feels like, or I felt like it put on this frontal facade of not
Edgy.
safe, edgy, and it's like, wow, this will be something really different. I mean, like the sex, like whatever, but like you're like, but it's you're right, it was safe.
Yeah.
When it
Which
looks
is
like
weird.
it wouldn't be. Yeah, which is weird.
I mean, like the sex scenes, like they felt abrasive at first, and then like midway through, you're like, which is part of the point, right? We're supposed to get used to it, and she talked about contempt, but it's like kind of a movie about exploring sexuality more than exploring life. I don't know if that was the point, but it's like either way, be less boring,
Yeah.
If it were funnier,
but it has all the trimmings of not being boring.
Yeah, it has all the like interesting subject matter, wacky, weird style,
costumes,
right?
yeah.
The camera. No other movie uses fisheye lenses. Like
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it has the trimmings of not safe, but it is safe.
Yeah. So in that way, what could be more humane, right? Anyway, that's the note to end on this episode of the Film Gamer podcast reviewing Poor Things, and I'm Will, and
I'm Eric. Check you later.
Yeah.